Welcome to the Grazing Grass Podcast, episode 11.
You don't need many bells and whistles, but if you got livestock out there grazing grass properly, you'll be able to do this for a long time.
You're listening to the Grazing Grass Podcast, helping grass farmers produce forages for livestock. On today's episode, we have Scott Hauck of Sacred Song Farm. We spend quite a bit of time talking about grazing hogs, but we also cover grazing sheep and cattle and forming a flerd, as well as other aspects of managing your forages and the fencing required. Before we get to Scott, if you've not subscribed to our podcast, we encourage you to subscribe. Also, follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. If you like the episode, share it with your friends. Also, leave us a review. Let's talk to Scott. Scott, we want to welcome you to the Grazing Grass Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your operation?
Yeah, so along with my wife Margaret and our daughter River, we farm and ranch here in Mancos, Colorado. The name of our farm is Sacred Song Farm, and we're a first-generation family farm and ranch, living to create happy, healthy, and strong humans while raising food in harmony with nature. And so we're just really committed to soil health and human health. That's our direction and our kind of North Star.
Very good. Now, in Colorado, tell us about, are you on the flatlands? You're near the mountains. Where are you in Colorado?
We are in a high mountain valley located at about 7,000 feet. The town of Mancos is just east of Mesa Verde National Park here in the Four Corners region. And our farm goes from about 7,000 feet up to about 8,500 feet on the 360 acres of owned ground. So we're right up against Menifee Mountain here. So it's some rugged terrain, but
yes.
we love it.
Very nice. And it does sound like it would be. What's your environment there, or not so much your environment, but your climate like there? Are you on a north or south facing slope?
So the farm faces east.
Okay.
And we get about anywhere from 12 to 16 inches of precipitation, total precip, including snowfall. This year has been quite a bit less. It's the third driest year on record, actually, and so
Wow.
We've had about 6.5 inches of total precip year to date, but we did get some snow today, so we're feeling good.
Oh, very good. I think that snow's headed my way, but it's not supposed to stay as snow when it gets to me.
Hey, we'll take it any which way, right?
Right. When is your last frost and first freeze usually?
Well, we can get a first freeze really into the end of August, early September. The nighttime temps being, right on the edge of the desert here can dip down quite quickly in the fall there. And then the last freeze can happen quite late as well. I mean, we'll have freezing temperatures sometimes into May and June, and snow into May often. So,
yes. So that gives you a short growing season.
yes, sir, it does. And
yes,
but allows us to stockpile quite a bit of forage, which keeps its nutritional quality. Being a dry environment, the forage keeps real good nutritional quality throughout the year. So we can keep grazing as long as there's not 2 foot of snow, which we do.
Very good. What kind of forages do you have?
The irrigated ground is primarily brome grass, alfalfa, a little bit of timothy and orchard grass. Starting to get some clovers coming in, which is a good sign. And the dry ground is more of the native perennials, the crested wheat, western wheat, Indian rice grass, and then your sagebrush, your oak brush, these sorts of things.
Very nice. And on your farm, you have a few different species of livestock?
Yes, sir. We raise beef, lamb, pork, and poultry. And we try to utilize and let these animals all express their instinctive behaviors, and just really going for that farm ecosystem.
Tell us a little bit about how you manage your livestock on your farm.
So we try, like I said, to really be as true to nature as possible and to look to nature for the template, if you will, for how we're going to raise these animals. And so uh, the cattle are out on open ground primarily for the vast majority of the year. We're moving them daily. The sheep are out on open ground, uh, moving either with or behind the cattle, moving them daily. And then you got the poultry, the laying hens moving behind all them to do the parasite control, a la Joel Salatin and Polyface Farm. They've really created and really been able to, at scale, get those patterns on the conventional and the commodity production model, to be able to raise food in this way.
Yes.
And the hogs we raise in the woods. Pigs are woodland creatures, so we raise them in the shade of the pinyon and the juniper trees and the oak brush, and let them do what a pig does, which is root and wallow. And there's nothing better than seeing a group of pigs sleeping in the dappled shade of the pinyon and juniper forests that we have here up on the hills that go up to the mountain to the east of us. And it's a beautiful thing. And since we started doing that about 3 years ago, we will never look back. It seems to fit quite nicely with our environment.
Oh, very good. Are the hogs in permanent pasture or are they rotated as well?
So we're using polywire, 2 strands of polywire, and we move them every week to 10 days. We'll give
Oh,
a
yes.
group of 30 to 40 hogs, 2 to 3 acre area, and just keep them moving. And we've started to see a lot more understory growth. And anytime we do get some moisture, there's pretty instant germination. And we've been seeing a lot more brome grass which is lying in that latent seed bank, and just is waiting for the opportunity for that water to collect in the little micro ponds, if you will, where a pig puts his snout
Oh,
and digs
yes.
around. And in our arid environment, where a lot of that ground gets hard soil capped in between trees, getting the pigs in there to break it up and then getting them off it to prepare it for rain, you see a lot of really good germination, and it's moving the landscape in the right direction. It's good to see.
Oh, I'm sure it is. So you move them every 7 to 10 days on a few acres. How long before you come back to that area?
So they're there just for in that 2 to 3 acre paddock just for one time and during the whole growing season,
Oh,
and
yes.
so we're
Yes.
giving them, and then I try to give it a 16 to 18 month rest, and I do that by starting them at opposite ends in alternating years. So in one end, I'll start them at the north end and move them to the south end of about a 30-acre patch of woods that we have with permanent fencing on either side. Then use the polywire as the ladder rungs, if you will.
Oh,
And
yes.
and then the next year I'll start them at the south end and move them north. So that allows us to get that 16 to 18 month rest period. But like with anything, nature is so dynamic, and so we've got to, with this drought that we're in, which I don't like to talk about drought very much. It's just, it's the way that our environment is going, and so we as farmers and ranchers have to adapt to that. Doing too much complaining doesn't do us much good. So we're actually in the process of getting another 30 to 40 acres fenced so that we can, if necessary, increase those rest periods even longer.
Oh, yes. Yes. We had a Marcos Jeffries on episode 9 talking about his drought in Mexico and how long they've stretched out the rest periods.
It's crucial. It really goes back to, we were trained in holistic management and permaculture, and the permaculture principle of observe and interact is really kind of the operating system, if you will, for humans that are trying to being first generation farmers. We're kind of learning a lot as we go, and it's this whole 6 year process of farming and ranching has just been one big learning experience, and will continue to be, I'm sure. So we're really committed to just taking what the land and what Mother Nature gives us, and not trying to force anything on her, and using our senses to see what we can do.
Very good. I want to come back to the hogs, but I want to ask you about what brought you to farming. Being a first generation, you weren't raised on a farm?
No, sir. I got quite inspired. My uncle in his 40s moved out to the country and got some sheep, and I really loved the physical nature of that work and being around the livestock, the animal husbandry aspect. He's got a great gift for being around his sheep and his ewes and assisting them at birth with need if need be, and for lack of a better term, the energetics of, if you will, moving livestock and animal husbandry is very much about how do we carry ourselves in our own our internal landscape, if you will, our mood, our ability to stay calm, to work with these animals in a way where they want to be around us as opposed to go running off from us.
Right.
And
Yes.
so he really inspired me. And my wife and I met in college. We started gardening together. 8 years ago, we had our first garden together in college. And ever since then, we both kind of found a deep passion and a love for just trying to return to the natural way of being, trying to return to the process of growing our own food and being in touch with natural cycles. And so we traveled around quite a bit. We went to Peru and farmed at 10,000 feet there, where the only piece of steel on that farm was the plow behind a big bull, growing beans and potatoes. And then we moved to Southwest Wisconsin, where we were on a farm called New Forest Farm, owned by the Shepherds, Mark and Jen Shepherd, which is kind of a permaculture mecca. It's a 110-acre food forest, and we raised beef cattle and hogs there. And that's where we got back into livestock. Up until that time, we've been doing a lot of plants, a lot of vegetables and
Oh,
fruits
yes.
and flowers, medicinal herbs, and these things, and really got back into livestock there in Wisconsin. And when we moved down here to Southwest Colorado, we'd kind of found our calling, if you will, what we really wanted to commit ourselves to doing. And so here we are.
Very good. Sounds like a wonderful journey thus far and very wide ranging as well.
It has been, and it's been full of a lot of different lessons. I mean, the process of grazing grass, the focus of this podcast and this conversation is really kind of, every day you're going out moving those animals, you learn more about yourself than you really do anything else. At least I have. It's
Yes.
the responsibility and the humility of interacting with nature in this way and interacting with the animals, especially when you're doing not just all farming and ranching is this way, but when you try to go down the regenerative path of moving animals all the time, it forces you into a position to really realize that you're working with nature, and working against her is going to only set you back further, because there's not too many inputs or too much machinery that can bust you out of any problem you get in. So we really have realized that the farm seems to reflect what's going on inside us. For me, as
Oh,
a
yes.
rancher, I go out and I see if there's something going on that I don't like. I've learned to kind of look inside myself and do some reflection, because that's where the issue really is. And once I get that settled, then I can get the farm back in working order. And so
Yes.
the two are connected.
Very interesting journey. I want to jump back to the hogs because I haven't talked to very many people rotating hogs or doing much with hogs. So, are you running sows or are you buying feeders and raise them up to fat hogs? How are you doing that?
Well, we are in an area where not many folks are raising hogs, and
Yes.
so getting our supply of weaner pigs has been quite challenging. And we started out with some sows, and that's a whole nother enterprise. Keeping sows on deep
Oh,
bedding
yes.
throughout the winter, breeding them, keeping boars separate from everybody. There's nothing more motivated than a boar, let me tell you. And
Yes.
so, um, and so that's from just a management standpoint, it's a whole nother enterprise, and you have to see it that way. And from a cash flow standpoint, all these things.
Oh,
So
yes.
we went to, in the last couple of years, just buying in feeder pigs, but that supply has the demand for our pork has grown quite quickly, and our ability to raise quite a bit of pork. We finished about 50 hogs this year, and the sky's the limit. Thank God we're sold out, and
Oh, yes.
folks love the product, and we're so grateful for that, and we're humbled by it. So we're in the process now of building back up the sow herd. We've got one boar and 6 sows, and we'll be both buying in feeder pigs and also raising up some of our own stock. And so we're excited for a new challenge and happy about it.
It sounds exciting. One thing you mentioned there was about, considering that breeding hog herd as a separate enterprise than your growing pigs. One thing Walt Davis talks about in How to Not Go Broke Ranching was make sure you look at those enterprises. You may be going broke as a farm, but there may be enterprises in there doing great. So, yes, you have to keep those separate. But at the same time, you got to realize if you can get feeder pigs available when you need them. Now, as you talk about your hogs and your boars and sows, do you have a certain breed you're going with?
Yes, sir. We raise Kunis and Mangalitsis. Both of those breeds actually have interesting stories. They're some rarer breeds. The Mangalitsa has come to fame. Some folks call it the Kobe beef of pork. It's just incredibly high quality fat content, high quality marbling, and just gorgeous pork. And those pigs are from Hungary. The Mangalitsas are from Hungary originally, and they're actually the closest genetic line to the wild European boar that's been domesticated.
Oh, okay.
And the Kunis are originally from New Zealand, but even by way of Southeast Asia, they're a lot like a Vietnamese potbelly pig, and so a smaller
Yes.
breed. But we chose those breeds because of their foraging abilities. I mean, these pigs have an incredible ability, if you give them the opportunity, to not only forage and make a living out on the land. They get a supplement of non-GMO and organic feed from here in Colorado. But if you give them an opportunity, man, they can learn to graze and to forage for so many different things that you'd never imagine. I mean, those pigs will select some sage, they'll select acorns and pine nuts, and they really will use their instincts and their intuitive behavior to be pigs and to kind of use the gifts that God gave them to go out there
Oh, yes.
and do
Yes.
their thing. And so we are having a lot of success with a cross of those two because being more heritage breeds and rarer breeds, they grow a bit slower. And so
Yes.
for our ability to market these pigs and get them up to weight, not as fast as conventional pigs, and that's not our goal in
Right.
that
Right.
6-month range or 8-month range. But if we could get them to finish in 12, 14 months as opposed to 14 or 16 months, that's a big difference for us. And so the cross seems to be growing beautifully and very, very hardy. They put on a nice winter coat, and we'll keep them up in the woods until we get some decent snow, and then
Oh, yes.
take them down. And their winter housing is on deep bedding, where we have borrowed from the Saltons again, but layering in grain in that deep bedding, and then those pigs turn that over and from anaerobic into aerobic compost throughout the winter, and then that goes back out onto the fields. And so it's anything we can do to have the entire loop closed at every step of the life cycle of
Oh,
these
yes.
animals is what we're shooting for.
And do you prefer one breed over the other as your maternal breed, or do you find them pretty equal?
Well, we've never had any Kuni sows. This will be our first batch. There's
Oh,
only two
okay.
of them, and so we'll see how they do. But the Mangalitsas are absolutely incredible mothers. You do actually, we found that they do better farrowing out in the woods, and they will actually. We had one sow early in the spring. They hadn't gone out to their summer pasture yet up in the woods, and she jumped out of her pen, went up into the woods, and made just the most beautiful nest. I mean, it just bring you to
Oh,
tears.
yes.
Honestly, it was incredible to see the just deep innate behavior of this animal who knew exactly what she needed to do. And
Oh,
she
yes.
she raised up a nice litter of piglets, and then we walked her back down to be with everybody else. And she was awfully content, and I think pretty happy that we left her alone there for a week or so. And I just checked on her daily just to
Oh,
make sure
yes.
everything was all right. But we've got some predation in this area, serious predation, quite a bit in mountain lions and coyotes and foxes and anything that'd like to have a piglet for food. But man, she raised those piglets
Oh,
up,
yes.
and it was a beautiful thing.
Oh, I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was. Do you have you mentioned predation. Do you have livestock guardian dogs?
We have livestock guarding dogs with the poultry and with the sheep. Our sheep flock is going to go to a more seasonal flock because we got a lot going on here. And so I'm trying everything I can do to use fencing strategically to get the flocks, to get the sheep flock and the beef cattle herd together.
Oh,
for the
yes.
day for the daily moves. And so the livestock guardian dog, we can just kind of keep her with the poultry primarily because we found that those sheep being in with the beef cattle is a pretty good deterrent. And so,
Yes, yes.
and there's always the laying hens coming in behind everybody. We have Pyrenees, and so Polly, our guard dog, she's never far behind. But
Oh, yes.
anyways, we do have quite a bit of pressure. We've this part of Colorado has, think about, I'm not quite sure how many years ago, but less than a decade ago, the Fish and Game did a study on population of mountain lions here in our area, and we had one of the densest populations in the entire state of Colorado. And so there's certainly
Oh,
cats
wow.
here, and quite a bit of
Yes.
coyotes and foxes and bald eagles, golden eagles. It's a stunning landscape. We don't mind it one bit, if I'm going to be honest with
Oh,
you,
right.
because it's our job as farmers and ranchers to figure out how to work with nature. And the wildlife, to me and to our family here, is a great sign that we're moving in the right direction. When we've got coyotes and foxes and I see bunnies running around, that is a good sign to me. When I see
Oh, yes.
mountain lion tracks and I see a bunch of deer and elk on the place that we didn't see 3 years ago, that's all a good sign. It
Oh,
comes with new
yes.
challenges, but they're welcome challenges.
Right, yes. And you're moving your cattle and sheep daily. How's that working? You're using a poly reel, and you mentioned that you want to move them together using multiple wires. How's that working for you?
Yeah, so we experimented this past year putting the flock and the herd together, and I was using 3 strands of poly wire, and there's permanent fencing on either side. That's on one side is woven wire, and on the other side is 3 strands of aluminum 14 gauge hot
Oh,
wire.
yes.
And we found that worked quite well, and that was just on the irrigated ground. And and so this past year we did have the sheep in netting, kind of bouncing them around a couple small leased farms that we have, and that works well for us. And the cattle, when the sheep aren't with them, are just on a single strand or two
Oh, yes.
strands, depending on how rambunctious the calves are feeling. And
Oh,
so,
yes. Yeah.
so, but it works well. And the so for the growing season, they're moving daily, and then we like to take a little bit of time off in the winter, and so we move cattle and sheep about once a week in the off season on stockpiled forage.
Oh, okay. And how do you manage for that stockpile forage?
Well, we're constantly trying to utilize the water when we do get it. And so on our irrigated ground, we are trying to grow, and really, as a rule, we're trying to grow as much biomass as possible. In some more temperate parts of the country, you can really keep those plants in a vegetative state. And on our irrigated ground, we can do that for about one pass, keep it in a vegetative state. But I've found that in our country, with temperamental nature of our precipitation, we really have to be managing for as much biomass as possible. And so we try to let everything on the dry ground, throw a seed head, and so that we can get all that laid down on the ground as cover to reduce the bare ground. And then we can come back normally in the late fall into the winter on what has been now a second, or sometimes if we've had enough water, a third regrowth of now standing stockpiled forage that's all thrown a seed head and is ready to be grazed throughout the winter.
And are you able to stockpile enough forages to graze throughout the winter, or are you running out of stockpiled forages before spring gets here?
Well, it's been a balancing act. Since we're doing all direct marketing of the meat products, and that's been going quite well. We've increased the herd quite a bit this past year, after a year where we did have 140% of normal snowfall. So we did have a bunch of forage to feed all these new animals.
Oh, yes.
And so we were feeling good about that. And then we destocked and harvested about 25 of those head. And so now moving into this winter, where we had the third driest year on record, we're got much less stockpiled forage, but I think we'll be able to make it through with feeding only about 60 days worth of hay this year.
Oh, very good.
We've been lucky enough to pick up some leased farms around us that just really people's backyards. A lot of places
Oh, yes.
around us. Mancos is an interesting town. It's an agricultural community for sure, but there's quite a bit of families around us, and so we've got neighbors on all 4 sides of our house here, and each one of those neighbors has about 20 acres. 20 to 40 acres. And so those places don't have much fencing on them, but they've got a lot of old rank feed that's been growing up over years and years of primarily brome grass. And so we've been able to lease some of those and put fencing in and pick up some extra stockpile that we otherwise wouldn't have had to be able to save us on some hay feeding and get us back to that 60 days worth of feed and hay this year. So it's a dance, but we're making it work.
Very good. You're finding hidden value there in those backyards, basically.
It takes some work. There's a lot of quite large conventional cattlemen around us. And so as a result, a lot of the larger acreage ground is taken up in leases. And so we've had to get creative and try to, and I think it comes from, some of our training in permaculture and holistic management and seeing value in all land and how can, what sort of animals are meant to be on that place, and so
Yes.
wherever I see a 5 or 10 acre field, I say, hey man, if I could get some fence around it, I'll walk them down the road a ways and get them on it for a week or 2 weeks. It's worth it to me to put that, not only for the feed value, which is a big deal, but the community value and the relationship value that's invaluable. You can't put a price tag on that.
Oh,
And
yes.
forming those relationships is never time wasted.
Very true. Very true. With your cattle and sheep, what breeds are you using for that? And are you grass finishing them?
Yeah, so we are entirely a grass-based operation. The cattle are primarily Angus and low-line Angus, Aberdeen Angus.
Okay.
We've also got some a few different Longhorn genetics in there, and there's some Hereford genetics as well. Kind of honestly, whatever we could find that's in the area, and
Yes.
and the sheep are Katahdin. We used to raise wool sheep, but we switched to the hair sheep and have just we will never look back. We love raising the Katahdins and just a great sheep.
Yes. Very good. Yes. I have Katahdins as well, and they amaze me with their easygoing. They seem, let me get my S's out. They seem to stay fat on nothing.
It's true, and they I've found that for especially for our management style and being able to run them on poly wire and not have to use the netting is a
Oh,
big
yes.
advantage. And a hair sheep, they'll react to that fence a little bit quicker and easier than a wool sheep will. And so,
Oh, yes.
but like you said, they're great mothers, very easygoing, just a great sheep. But we wouldn't trade them for the world.
Very good, Scott. Oh, one thing I didn't ask you about was your watering of animals as you move them through their paddocks. How are you managing that? Do you have enough natural water sources or?
So on the dry ground, there is an incredible network of ditches where that the old surveyors laid out, during the Depression era, big
Oh, yes.
government-led works projects. They put in big dams all over the country, and same here down in southwestern Colorado. And so back in the 40s and 50s, they laid out a quite impressive network of ditches on contour. And so we have a ditch on contour that we're able to access for our livestock watering, and we design our fencing around that to be able to have live water during the growing season on our
Oh,
dry
yes.
ground, which is a huge bonus for the
Oh,
hogs.
that would be.
For the cattle on irrigated ground, have risers that are pressure fed, and so we just do a 3/4 inch adapter off of a big 2-inch riser that when it's not watering cattle is running our side roll irrigation system. And so
Okay.
so we can pretty easily have water wherever we need it on the irrigated ground. And for the hogs, we have a trailer with a 450-gallon tank on it with a little cutout piece of a hose and a hog water nipple on the end of it. And they do just fine. That tank will last them about that whole time, a week to 10 days. And so
Oh, yes.
they've got water on demand, and we just move that trailer along with them when we move their feed and we move the herd. And so yeah, that's our watering system. But we're really trying to even more so get into more passive watering systems, putting in some ponds in strategic places to be able to store water for winter watering and gravity feeding out of ponds for winter watering. Because during the winter we are primarily hauling water, which is a job, and we don't want to do that forever. So
Yes, yes. Yes, I encourage you down that path because hauling water gets old.
Yes, yes, it does. That is an understatement.
Well, Scott, we're at the time of our episode for our famous four questions, the four questions we ask all of our guests. Our first question is, what's your favorite grazing grass related book or resource?
Well, there's two or three that come to mind, and one of them doesn't have to do exactly with grazing grass, but I think it provides a great paradigm through which to view grazing grass, and that's The One Straw Revolution by Masanobu Fukuoka. And I would say, with regards to grass management and farm management, I love Alan Savory's Holistic Management textbook, which is really
Yes,
ask yourself the question of how do you want your life to be, and that's valuable no matter what we're doing. And so it's that is a timeless resource here for us. And then also thoughts and lessons from an old cattleman, Gordon Hazard. I think, yeah,
oh,
Gordon
yes.
Hazard provides probably the most straightforward and just true, capital T, true way to ranch profitably. And you don't need many bells and whistles, but if you got livestock out there grazing grass properly, you'll be able to do this for a long time.
Very good selections there. What tool could you not live without on your farm?
Oh, stay fix fault finder. Easy.
So tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, it's a simple little remote. You just put it on your hot wire, and it'll tell you wherever you got a fault in that hot wire and how many volts you're running. And so on our farm, the place that we own now is pretty underdeveloped, not much fencing on it, and we back up to the mountain. The mountain's not fenced, and the only fencing is kind of along the county road where we live, and so everything else is hot wire. And so I am constantly going to different strategic spots on the farm and checking to make sure that we got spark. And it's awful nice. If we don't, it'll tell you where the fault is at and how much power you're losing. And so it makes fixing a pretty quick, easy job.
Very good. And you're using a Stay Fix Energizer?
Yes, we've got here when we're at the home place, we've got a 10 joule energizer just hooked into the grid. And then when
Yes.
if we're bouncing them around on any leased ground, we have a portable 3 joule Stay Fix Energizer that I hook up to a car battery and just keep
Oh,
swapping
okay.
those out as need be. But we're able to keep, if things are all running right, we're able to keep 8 to 10,000 volts in the system at all times.
Oh, yes. And for your hogs, how much voltage do hogs require for them to respect the wire?
Well, it depends on the pig, and some of
Yeah.
them get awfully smart towards the end, and the man, we had one beautiful. She was kind of golden, had like blonde hair, and she figured out how to jump 2 wires of fence, and I had never
Oh,
seen
yes.
anything like it in my life. But mostly, I mean, you got to keep it about 6,000 volts for the hogs. But I'd say about 70% of them, once they hit it once, they'll never test it again. They won't even walk near it if it's laying on the ground.
Oh, yes.
Everybody else, if you keep it tight, you have no issues at all. And so it's a great way to raise hogs, and it's just about getting them trained up when they're young.
Oh, yes. What do you know now that you wish you knew a few years ago or you would tell someone just starting out?
I would say that number one, don't panic, because no matter what wreck you're in, you'll get out of it if you keep a level head. Well, you're going to get out of it no matter what, but you'll get out of it quicker and with a smile on your face if you keep a level head and you just keep going. And I'd say number two, that the outer landscape is a mirror to the inner landscape. And so don't be afraid to look out at your farm and see how that can inform how you can become a better person. And that's been a huge point of emphasis for myself, because being first generation, getting into interacting with nature on a daily basis, being a suburban kid growing up, nature's had a lot to teach me and about myself, and a lot to teach me about how to be a better father and husband. And so don't be afraid to walk humbly, because if we can stay humble, that's how we're going to build humus in the soil. And so that's what I'd say to anybody starting out.
Excellent advice. And you mentioned being a first generation farmer. I've got a few generations of farming in my background, And I've been on a farm for years, and nature continues to teach me things. And just when I start to believe I have it figured out, I'm reminded I don't.
Amen. It's I love how I've mentioned Joel Salatin. He's a a far off hero of mine, and
Yes,
he has a beautiful quote that kind of sums it up, that nature is an object lesson of spiritual truth, and so that's what she's there to do. She's there to teach us how to be better people. And if we're working awfully hard out here trying to raise animals right and try to take care of the land right and try to keep grass grazed properly, we might as well become better people while we're doing it.
very true. Very true. Where can others find out more about you and your farm?
So you can find us at sacredsongfarm.com. My wife keeps a beautiful Instagram and Facebook going at Sacred Song Farm. And I'm on Twitter periodically at Sacred Song Farm as well.
We'll put links to your website and your social media accounts on the show notes.
Thank
Well,
you.
Scott, we really appreciate having you on here. We've enjoyed it.
Thank you, Cal. It was a pleasure, and hope to talk to you again someday.
You've been listening to the Grazing Grass Podcast, helping grass farmers produce forages for livestock. Subscribe, share. We appreciate it. Until next time, keep grazing.